Hollywood, Florida. I was
Yeah.
actually on site with a client for 2 weeks, and somebody at OutSystems had said, "Oh, by the way, since you're going to be here, another one of our clients is holding a user group a mile away at the office of another one of our clients. Would you like to go to that?" And I said, "Sure." And then right before they said, "By the way, would you also like to speak there?" And I said, "Sure, I can do that. I'm working on some things anyways." Um, and so I spoke there, and that was fun. Um, I know I've done some things online since then, but I can't remember the dates or the locations. It just doesn't stand out in my head so much. But that one stood out because I remember I was in person, I was in there, and a bunch of the people who were with me on site came to it as well. So we had a good time. We had some nice food. I got to meet, I believe it was Taki, one of the OutSystems, one of their solutions architects at the time. I believe he's still at OutSystems, so that was an interesting thing. I liked it.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Justin. So we have been running the OutSystems Chennai user group since 2020.
Mhm.
So it's been over 53 sessions, if I'm not wrong. Should be more than that. My bad. And yeah, so this is the first time we are running an MVP month, Justin, where we are inviting MVPs to lead sessions as part of our chapter, and yeah, share their knowledge with a greater set of audiences. So yeah, maybe we'll wait for another couple of minutes, Justin, until
Okay.
a couple of more people shall be joining us, and then we'll get started. Yep.
I think I see two familiar names in the chat. I think I recognize those names.
And very well say hi. So, team, it will be great now that you guys have joined on time. Thank you very much for that. And it will be great if you can let us know about yourself, maybe your name and maybe, a quick introduction about you. In fact, if you wish, I can enable the presenter mode for you and you can unmute and speak about yourself. So if you wish to, or otherwise, if you can very well let us know via chat about yourself, that will be great. And I see messages from Bien, Mr. Nikhil, Mr. Dinesh, Mr. Jivita. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, Justin, actually, within India, we have many user groups. So, even one user group for every major city. And we have one for Bangalore, for Chennai, for Pune, for Nagpur. So, wherever we see traction, there is a user group available. And now that Developer Days is happening in Bangalore next week on 23rd. So that is again a very major occasion for all the user group organizers, not just organizer, but every developer out there in India to gather and share thoughts about our system. So and there are many initiatives that we are running in order to promote the Developer Days also that is happening in Bangalore. So just so I know I'm not sure, but is the Developer Days was there a Developer Days planned in the US? Did it?
I've not seen what they're having. Um, right it's right in the middle of November. They're having an event in Miami, Florida. I don't believe it's Developers Day. It looks like it's a shortened version of Next Step. It's just one day. But that's better. They have not had really anything like one in the United States for a few years. So I'm glad to see that they're doing something for a day in Florida. They've given me a lot. Like I think they invited me about 2, 3 weeks ago. One of the people I work with at OutSystems reached out to me and a number of other people I know and said, "Hey, by the way, we're doing this. Please make sure, blah blah blah." And I said, "Okay, I'll give that a consider." So I have not seen anything like a call for speakers or anything like that. So I don't think it's like a full developers day. Like a developers day, they'd have the call for speakers and everything else. I have not seen anything like that. I believe they've just come with business speakers like they would for one, but without a developers day.
Understood. Understood, Justin. All right, I guess we can get started. So I'll just do a very quick introduction about Chennai OutSystems user group, about OutSystems as a whole, OutSystems user group as a whole, and then maybe I'll hand the session over to you, Justin. Yep. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Yep. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here for today's session and for joining the session on time. So this again is another technical session that we are hosting as part of our MVP month initiative. So we have already gone past two sessions, and this is our third session, and we have one more session lined up for this month. And I foresee that this initiative will continue even next month. So looking forward to your cooperation and support for this initiative. Now that I'm going to skip all these introductions, okay, be it about developer schools or be it about the community, as these things are very well known to everyone who joins a user group session usually. So if you wish to know about any of these, yes, you can very well reach out to me. But one thing that I would like to stress upon is the fact that it is about the OutSystems research program. So if you're someone who would be really, really willing to explore the latest features of OutSystems, then this is the program for you. And this will also give you a lot of many opportunities to earn free badges from OutSystems, plus learn more about the OutSystems. And also, who knows, this will also make you eligible for any of the existing titles that OutSystems offers. Could be the champion title or the MVP title. Okay. So yeah, with this, yes, on the speaker part, yes, I'll hand the session over to Justin in a while. But on the organizers part, yes, we have two organizers for OutSystems Chennai user group. One shall be Hati Mary. She's working with Asia. She's an OutSystems champion. She's been a Neo Award winner twice. And the other organizer is myself. I am an OutSystems MVP. I'm also working with a startup. And yep, so that is all about us. Now I would like to hand the session over to Justin to brief us on the overall user workflow part with ODC. So yep, over
All
to you,
right.
Justin.
All right. So my name is Justin James. I've been working with OutSystems since 2008. That's when I first came across it. I was writing for a company called Tech Republic. It was a big website at the time. I don't think they're quite as popular now. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're not as popular as they used to be, unfortunately. But I've been writing for them for about 7 years, and what I had done is I had been approached by OutSystems to write about their tool, and I've been writing software since the early 80s. You can tell I've got a little bit of gray in here. Um, so I've been around and I've seen a lot of tools that made very similar promises. And based on their promises, I was not very impressed because I've seen, like I said, I've seen a lot of tools that said that they did the same things that OutSystems had done. But, being a writer, you sometimes need things to write about. And so I said, okay, I'll write about your software, I'll write about your tool, and let me take a look at it. And when I took a look at it, I was actually pretty impressed. I was very surprised that it worked the way it said it would. I was very surprised that it worked well. I was very surprised that it was reliable, that it was not frustrating to use, that it didn't have weird surprises in it. And so I said, I could actually use this tool for a project. And so I tried fooling around with it and I started building a little project on my own. And at the time, I was one of the few people in the United States using it. Almost everybody was in Europe. So after about noon, my time, nobody would be posting to the forums except for me. And so I was able to develop a reputation for understanding this tool. And if I didn't know the answer, I'd go find out the answer. And then people started coming to me and asking me to do work. And they even said, I'll pay you to do work. And I said, oh, this is fantastic. I like money. So I accidentally started doing freelance out systems consulting work. And then I left my job to focus on that full time. And then that became my career, was doing out systems work. So that was 2008, 2009. So I've been doing this for a while now. I've worked for companies like FICO doing credit originations work. I've worked for companies like Watify. They are a big OutSystems company. They write a SaaS application that manages CrossFit gyms around the world. So when I started there in 2012, they had 100 users and 10 clients using their software. And 3 years later, when I left, they had 300,000 users across the world and over 2,500 clients using their software. At the time, we were processing about $750 million a year through that application on behalf of these small gyms, these small businesses. So that was very satisfying to work for. It would always be cool. Sometimes you'd go to do as a support ticket and you'd log into a customer's installation and you'd see celebrities and famous athletes, professional wrestlers, for example, using your application, people who you know. You say, I know that person. They use this tool. So that was always pretty fun. But that's how I got my start using OutSystems. And then when they started the MVP program in 2016, I was one of the first MVPs that they had for that. So that's a brief snapshot of my history. The last few years, I've been doing a lot of freelance work, a lot of consulting. I worked for a number of clients, and along that way, that is how I started working with ODC. I had one client who said, "We want to build an OutSystems application, and we want to do it on ODC." And I said, "All right, I know a bit about ODC. I've been in some technical sessions. I've looked at the stuff. I've got access to an ODC installation with the OutSystems MVPs. Let me go ahead and work on your project on ODC." And that's how I got my start with ODC. So today, what I'm going to be talking to you about is user management in ODC. This is something that has come up. Um, it's an important topic because it is one of the biggest changes in ODC from OutSystems 11 and previous. Um, Before I get started, I'd love it if people could go in the chat and just let me know how many of you are currently using ODC, and if so, if you're doing user management within your application. I'll just give you a couple moments for that.
So, guys, to repeat what Justin had said, so how many of you are doing user management within your ODC org? If so, please do let us know in the chat. If not, you can very well say that you're not doing it. That way, we will at least know that you've been listening to us. So, please.
So if not many people are using ODC, that's not a big surprise. I know that OutSystems has been selling ODC for new clients for a few years now. But given the nature of us, most of us are probably working for professional services companies. We've probably been on the same projects for a few years. So I'm not surprised if not many of us are using ODC. I know that because the migration tool is currently quite limited, not many applications have upgraded ODC. So this is going to be some new news for people, and that's fine. I wish I had some of this knowledge before I had gotten started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share a very short, and when I say very short, I mean one page PowerPoint. I know that not everybody likes PowerPoints. I know that I write the most boring PowerPoints ever. My PowerPoints are just bullet points, and if I'm in a really interesting mood, I'll go to image search and find a funny image to put in there. So this is just a one-page PowerPoint, I promise. Um, Let me go ahead and get that shared for you. Can everybody see my, oh, technically two-page PowerPoint because I put a title page. Can everybody see this?
Oh, yeah, we can see your screen, Justin.
Great. So the biggest thing to keep in mind, this is absolutely the biggest change. Actually, I should probably give a little bit of an introduction here. If you're not familiar with ODC, um, one of the things that ODC does is it used to be for user management, you would have lifetime, you would go in, you would manage your what they would call enterprise users, meaning your developers, your infrastructure people, people who have basically people who have access to lifetime and service studio. And those would be your enterprise users, and you would manage them through lifetime. And then you had users of your application who you could either go to the user's application, manage them, or you could go to manage them in code. And many of us would build user management into our applications so that we didn't have to grant access to the user's application, which was not the prettiest or easiest to use application. And that's how we did user management in OutSystems 11. And each environment had its own database table with the users. And so you could have the user Justin James at titaniumcrowbar.com in the development group, in the development environment, and that might be user ID 59, and it would, and then that user did not have to exist in any other environment. Or if I created that user in production, that might be user ID 353 because it was a totally different user record. The user record was stored in a table in each environment. In ODC, ODC has one centralized user management. And because of that, because it has one centralized user management, those users are shared between all environments. Same username, same password. Now, that's a little bit of a, there's some pros, there's some cons with that. For example, my testers, um, if you're managing through the portal, it's really nice for you to just have one username and password in dev, in production, in QA. But it also means that if you need to test with different users who maybe have to receive emails or something else, you either need to have a separate email address or you need to do something like, Justin James plus test case number 5 at titaniumcrowbar.com. You have to do a couple tricks or just have a bunch of different email addresses for these different users, which is fine, not a big deal, just something to be aware of. But when we start doing user management in code, this is going to come into play. And so it's very important. This is why I have it like the top bullet point here, all in capitals. Users are shared in all environments. If you update a user, it'll be shared, update, all environments will see that. And most importantly, and this is why I'm saying this is so important, if you delete a user, it's deleted in all environments. So when you go to test any code you write, be very aware to not use your actual user because you will be, the actual user that you use for accessing Lifetime, for accessing the portal, not Lifetime, rather the portal, ODC Studio, because you will be altering that user that you use for writing code, deploying code, management, and so on. Be very careful with this. Another thing to keep in mind, the user's entity, you will see a user's entity as a entity. It does not have the full list of users in it. It is more like a cache of users who have recently accessed that list. It is not the canonical cache as far as I can tell. Do not quote me on this. I do not work for OutSystems. I have not seen the source code for this. So when I say this, I may be incorrect, and that's why I'm saying this as with as many disclaimers as I can. As far as I can tell, nothing in the system is using the user's entity. Everything is using the user's API and getting real-time data. Um, the user's entity, I'm not sure exactly what the intended purpose is for ODC itself or why you would use it, but the user's entity does not have the full list of users in it. And as a result, you should not be taking things and joining it to that table. You should not do that. You will get inconsistent information if you do this. You will be surprised. Um, do not do this. The user key in the API is going to have a value in it that calls the user key. That's actually the same ID as the user entity. So if you need to ever refer to the user identity, such as using the get user ID function in your code, that is going to be the same thing as the user key. So that's what you should use. In ODC Studio, this was a surprise to me as well. I pulled up, I did view data on the user entity. I saw entries in there that are not live. Some had even had been deleted, and I knew they were deleted because I could not see them in the portal. This is normal. It should not alarm you. Again, that user entity is more like a cache of users who have recently used the system. I do not know the exact I do not know the exact factors that go into something appearing in the user's entity, but I do know that because the true list of these are the live users are from the API, and there's no necessarily like foreign key relationship between that and the user's entity. Because of that, there can be deleted users that do not exist in the system, but they'll show in the user entity. So don't be surprised if you see that. Don't be freaked out. Don't go submitting support ticket. This is normal. Again, I have to repeat, you should not use the user entity as a data source for your users in your application. Um, the one thing that I found coming up using the API, there is a rate limit. I personally have never encountered the rate limit. It's actually pretty high. But if you have a high volume environment, if you have an environment with tens of thousands of users and you're constantly accessing the API, you may hit the rate limit, or maybe you're doing a bulk import or a bulk update of users. Perhaps you have a function in your application where your user can upload a spreadsheet of their clients and you want a user for each client. So when they upload that spreadsheet, you create a user for each record in the spreadsheet. Maybe that situation you hit the rate limit. The rate limit's pretty high. I have not hit it, but I will show you the code that I wrote to handle the rate limit if I hit it. I'm going to take a quick pause here, stop my sharing, and take a quick pause before I start showing you code. Are there any questions? Are there any concerns? I do see one here. The user list in portal is the same with user list in database. So the user list in the portal is an accurate list. As far as I can tell, it is the same as the API. The user list in the user entity in ODC Studio, that is what's in the database. That is not necessarily an accurate list. Um, I believe that what's in the database is a cache of recently logged in records. So if you have a low volume environment without much usage, you could have something in that cache in the database. Somebody logged in, it cached it to the database, and then you deleted the record from the portal or from the API, and it was not removed from that cache in that local database copy. As a result, you could see something in that database that's not in or not accurate because it had an update or a delete, but it's still in that cache because it has, maybe I don't know the size of the cache, but that is my understanding of the user entity is that's a local cache, local to that environment, a cache of who has logged in recently. And when things happen to the users in the API, it does not update those cache because how's a web service going to push to anybody who's cached? That's not going to happen. So that's the important information around that user entity. But the list in the user portal is the same as what's in the API. Any other questions before I show code? All right.
Yes, we can move on. Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to show you some code. Oops. Show ODC Studio. Can everyone see my ODC Studio instance?
Yes.
Great. So what I've done here is I've created a separate library for my user management access. This consumes the ODC API. ODC API has quite a few pieces in it. I have only found the need for a few calls. In fact, you can just see these 5 calls. These are the only ones that I've needed. Get open ID configuration. This is for authentication items. And then we have create user, delete user, update user. Oops, don't click that. And get users. And I'm also going to be showing you my personal philosophy on a couple code things along the way. So if you see code that you say, oh, that's not exactly how I would have written it, this is my personal philosophy on how certain code items should be handled. This is my personal philosophy on how API handling code should be written. It doesn't mean I think I'm right and that everyone else is wrong. It doesn't mean that you're wrong for doing it differently. It means these are personal code writing philosophies. So no need to be too worried about it. What I've done is I started by importing the calls that I needed. Okay, again, create user, delete user, get OpenID configuration, get users, update users. I like to prefix everything with ODC API and an underscore to make things more clear. Then what I've done, you'll see I have no database entities. I have the structures, nicely organized, nicely named. I started these with ODC create user response. I find that that's good because sometimes you can get, a lot of times things will be listed as just response or whatever, and you're like, that's great, but it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. In our logic, first thing we need is we need an authentication system. They have a token-based system, so we're calling this get OpenID configuration. And what I've done is I've just wrapped this up to get my configuration. And this gives us our endpoints and everything else from our system. And what you have to do, by the way, is in your ODC portal, you have to change the URL to your ODC URL. And the URL is not going to be your environment URL. It's actually going to be the URL to your portal environment. So if you look at your portal environment, it'll say something like justinjames.outsystems.dev. I forget the exact address. Yeah, outsystems.dev. Use that address, use that host name in your configuration because again, this is shared. If you try putting like, dev dot outsys, Justin's dev dot outsystems at outsystems dot app, which is the URL I'd use to get to my application, that will not work. It'll be like, it'll give you a 404. It won't have this stuff because the user management is shared. So this configuration goes to that shared URL and it just gets things like what's the endpoints and tokens and things like that. So first thing we do is we get that configuration. Now I'm running a get token. and I have to pass it the URL from that configuration, and I need some credentials, and I'm storing my credentials in ODC's settings. These are similar to site properties. Each environment has its own copy of the settings. Each consumer will have its own copy of the settings, and settings allow me to encrypt in the database. So this is a very good solution to address something I used to write a lot of code around. So I'm getting my API client and my API secret from my settings. And then I'm passing it to this get token call. This get token call is actually an HTTP post directly to it because that will give me my token. And now here's what I'm doing is I'm looking to make sure I get a 200. If I don't get a 200, I'm going to throw an exception. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the JSON from this, deserialize it, and extract my token and return it. Now, with this, if you look at my get token, you'll see that what I've done is I've made a couple things to wrap things up. This is what I'm exposing to the rest of my applications. The get users is an example. Get users has only two inputs. I've got a name or email address, and I've got user keys. These are just ways for me to filter. That's it. This is all I want to do is have simple filters. And it's going to return a list of users, and this is not going to be the direct object from the function. This is going to be my own structure. So this way my consumers are going to be masked from knowing the complexities under the hood. So I get my token. I then start, this is going to have a pagination system. So I'm going to start at page 1, the limit of 100. 100 is the highest number of records I can get, so I'm just going to get them all. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my REST call. Again, my personal way of doing things, I have wrapped this REST call. I have a exception handler here, and please note with my exception handler, I set abort transaction to no, so that this way any errors that come up will not do a database rollback for my consumer. And I also want to catch all my exceptions and not just bubble exceptions up. So again, my consumer is not hit with an unexpected database rollback due to an issue with an API call. This is my belief on how a integration should work. So based on my, so I pass this through, I have to pass in my authorization from my get token, and then here's where I make the actual call, and then I'm just going to assign the output. And you'll see I have an output that says is rate limited false, and I assign the response. If I have a rate limited exception, I'm going to mark is rate limited true. Now here's the thing to keep in mind. How does it know I have a rate limited exception? You'll see I have an on after response, and I'm looking for status code 429. This API will respond with status code 429 if we are rate limited. So then I'm just going to say exceeded rate limit. So this is how I know I catch a rate limited exception if I'm rate limited. So that's how I know I'm rate limited. Back to my caller, I've made my call. If I'm rate limited, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sleep. I've got a setting for my sleep delay. I think I set probably like 500 milliseconds or something like that if I had to guess. I don't remember what I set I checked my default setting. 200 milliseconds. So we do a 200 millisecond sleep, and then we go back and retry again. And we're going to just keep retrying until we're no longer rate limited. Then once we get through, now I'm going to map my responses to my output. Then I'm going to look at the total number of pages that's offering me as a possible, the response from this does say how many pages to expect, and it's going to tell me the current page number, or I'm keeping track of the current page number. If my current page number is less than the total number of pages that the API says to expect, I'm just going to change my page number. I'm going to increment it. I'm going to set the offset equal to what I got from the API, and then I'm just going to retry this. And I'm just going to keep doing this till I'm out. So what I'm doing here, and again, this is personal belief on how APIs should be written or should be integrated. It is my personal belief that the caller should never be aware of things like pagination. I kind of follow like you know how Apple says it just works for their phones, though as an iPhone user, I can promise you it does not always just work. Um, I like my API integrations to just work. I don't want the caller to ever have to think about pagination, rate limits, error messages. I don't want them to ever have to think about any of that. I want to put this on a silver platter for them to think about. So I'm handling the rate limits in here, I'm handling the pagination in there, and my consumers are just getting a nice clean list of users. They don't need to know about all of the other items. Um, so if you look at, for example, this ODC, this actual REST call, it has page information, count, limit, offset, total reset, all this stuff. When this comes out of my get users, they're just getting a clean, fresh list of users, nothing else. You'll see that I've also implemented delete user and creator update user. The creator update user, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the input. If there is a key in that input user info, again, the key is the ID. If there is a key, we're going to go to update user. If there's not a key, we're going to go to create user. Again, we check for rate limited. If we're rate limited, we go to if we're rate limited, we go to sleep and keep retrying until we can push it through. And that's it. This is, and then the delete, very simple. We're just getting our users. One of the things I do on the delete, and this is very important, what I found is that a lot of times in the consumers, because the consumers cannot query get user, the user's entity, because they can't query it and get accurate information, because again, users is a more of a cache of recently logged in users rather than an up-to-date list of information of the actual user records. Because of that, every client I've ever worked with on ODC, every ODC application I've ever worked with has done something to mirror the user's record for a particular environment. They've done something like a user extended table, their own user table, where when they access this API, they take the keys and they log them. So this way they have a table so that they can join things to that record. So whenever they update through the API, they update their table or their entity, and now they have an entity that they can join their records to, and they'll have function calls around that to use. Yeah, so for example, if you have a user edit page, you will go ahead, make the call to this creator update user, take the key value and store it in your own user record so that you can access the API as necessary. And they'll also have that user ID so that this way they can look it up on user ID. It's the same, the user ID for get user ID will be the same as the key in the API. If you make your own table, you'll have an environment specific table. So this way you don't have to see all the users that are exist in other environments, but not yours. This way, when you list users, you're not listing users for, you're not showing to your production users, you're not showing them the users in your development environment or your QA environment. If you join to that local table, but when you need to manipulate them, then you go to API. So because of that, with my delete, it is possible that if the caller has some sloppy code in it, it is possible that they have a user there. Not even if they're sloppy, it is possible that if they have a user there, they may have deleted it in the, maybe for example, they have a user, let's say Justin James at titaniumcrowbar.com, They may have deleted that user in the API from the production environment, but the development environment is not aware of that, so they still have in their local, my users entity, they may have Justin James at titaniumcrowbar.com in there still. They are not aware that's been deleted. So they're going to show it. They call delete. What happens? What we don't want to do is have them get an error that says, oh, yeah, that user does not exist. So we call, before we do a delete, we call get users, and you'll see I have a couple switches. Also, this is a personal preference. You'll see that I always have my otherwise for my switches go to a not implemented code path. The reason is that if there were to be a situation where the code were to change in a way that otherwise actually becomes a thing, I just want to have all my code paths to be known. I don't want to have an otherwise ever. Um, so if the user exists, if I have exactly one record, then we're going to go ahead and delete it. Again, is rate limited, we sleep. If we have more than one record, which should never exist, we should never have multiple users with this user key. I don't know how that situation could ever occur, but if it were to occur, we're going to throw an exception and say something's very weird here, should not happen. If we have none, then we're just going to exit. And this is a personal decision. You may not agree with that. That's fine. The reason why we exit is because we want to act as if the delete occurred, because for all intents and purposes, if they're trying to delete a user and that user doesn't exist, it means it's already deleted. We can tell them we deleted it. Another approach would be to return a message or a flag that says this user already has been deleted and does not exist. Another approach could be to throw an exception saying user not found. We can handle it any way you want. I personally chose, I'm not saying you're right or I think you're wrong. I personally chose to act as if the delete had been performed successfully so that the caller could proceed as normal. So this is how I'm doing my delete. And that's the big thing. So where I really got caught up on this application, um, was the shared user system where all the users are shared between my environments. And the reason why I got caught up on that was my test team. What was going on is my test team I did not properly explain to my test team, you have to be aware of this. So they were using their personal email addresses. So they were using, tester1 at, gmail.com for a test case. And keep in mind for this project, everybody was a contractor. It was a freelance contractor. So we didn't have a bunch of email addresses, corporate email addresses. So, you had tester1 saying, tester1 at gmail.com. This was also her username and password to the ODC portal. It was also her username and password to the main application. She had created, through the application, create a separate user called tester1 at gmail.com in the UAT environment. And then as part of her test, she deleted that user just to prove that the deletion worked. And then she goes back to the test environment, went back to the ODC portal or whatever and said, I've been kicked out. My user doesn't exist. What happened? Well, what happened, tester one, is you deleted your entire user in all environments. Oopsie. I had to go into the portal and I had to recreate her user record. I had to reassign her roles and permissions. Now she knows that she should, I don't know if everybody knows this, but in many, if not most email systems, you can take an email address and put plus after the name and before the at. You can put plus and then additional stuff. The email system will treat that as a separate email address, or it will receive it, but it'll send it to the part before the plus. So if I take Justin James at titaniumcrowbar.com, that's my email address. If I say Justin James 2 at titaniumcrowbar.com, that will be treated as a totally separate email user. I will not get that email if that user does not exist. The sender will get, you know, email not found or whatever. But if I put
Justin,
Justin,
sorry to interrupt. Is there a possibility to zoom the screen a little more as for some of the participants, it's not clearly visible, the labels of each. Yeah, yeah. Now it is better. Yeah. This
yep,
this is much better. Thank you.
yep, yeah, I've got a 4K monitor, so it's very difficult for people sometimes to see things. Um, but if I put as my email address in the system, if I tell it send email to Justin James plus test1 at titaniumcrowbar.com, that email will be delivered to Justin James, not Justin James plus. It will not look for a user called Justin James plus test1. It'll look for just Justin James. As a result, for all of my tests, I say Justin James plus test1, Justin James plus testing feature number 4, test number 3. I will do stuff like that. So I'll have all these users that start with Justin James and then plus, and then the exact use case, maybe even the environment that I'm testing. So I'll say Justin James plus QA underscore feature number 3 underscore test number 5 underscore test case 15 at titaniumcrowbar.com. And that's me going through all my tests, and all that email will come to me. They'll all be treated by ODC as separate users because they have a separate user name, because ODC doesn't care about the plus, but all the email will come to me. Make sure you do this. If you do not do something like this or use separate users for your testing, you will at some point find yourself in a situation, if you're testing password resets, if you're testing delete, if you're testing updates, you'll find yourself in a situation where you have accidentally destroyed your actual user that you use for actual work. It will be very confusing for your test team because they're saying, I'm getting weird results. They're getting weird results because they have users that were created in a different environment. That shared model, it's it's very useful for users of the portal. It's really nice to not have all these separate logins. That's fantastic. I love it, but it's going to make your testing not. I'm not even going to say more difficult, because honestly, this is how I always did things. I was actually surprised when people said, "Mike, I can't log in. Something's wrong." I was like, "Why can't you log in? This has been working right for me for some time." And then I looked at it and I said, "Oh yeah, you deleted your user. Of course you can't log in." I said, "Why are you testing with the same user? Like, who does that? I haven't used my actual, I haven't done that in probably 10 years since I discovered the plus thing." It really surprised me that my testers were doing that on this project. And then once I coached them on doing the plus thing, they've never done it again. So I know I keep talking about the plus thing. I know I keep talking about this. This is by far the number one biggest surprise and biggest thing that's going to hang you up, other than the user's entity itself not actually being the actual users, the actual up to date. Those are the two biggest things. That's why I keep coming back to it. I've got about 10 more minutes. I'm going to take some questions now. Let me go through the questions. Uh, oh, look at that. Mike de Guzman. Good to see you here, my friend. Glad to uh, Glad to know you're still around. Makes me happy. Mike and I worked together a few years ago. Um, Great guy, great person to work with. Unfortunately, we had to part ways due to circumstances outside of both of our control. Um, but I'll say that Mike's an awesome guy. Would love to work with him again. And if anybody has a chance to work with Mike, I you would love working with him too. Um, Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other questions that you'd like to know? Things that you'd like to know about? All right. So, can I share the OML of this application? Um, this is client code, so I cannot share the OML of the caller application for sure. I will ask my client if it's possible for me to share the OML. Keep in mind that to the best of my knowledge, the only way I can share an OML is by putting it up in the Forge. They may not be okay with me making code written um, on their behalf into the Forge. I will ask them. And as I like to say, you do not get a yes without risking a no. Any other questions? Anything else anybody would like to know? All right. Then what I'll do, I've got a meeting in about 10 minutes, so that I have to get to. But what I will do is I'll stop my sharing now, and I will hang out with you guys for the next 10 minutes until I have to go to my next meeting.
Sure. Justin, I also have a quiz prepared based on the content that you had discussed
Ooh,
in the past 50 minutes.
okay.
So, yeah, maybe we can play the quiz. So, let me share my screen. So, team, unlike the usual case, there are totally 7 quiz questions this time. So, I'm sharing my screen once the quiz is all set. 1 minute. Just starting it. Mhm. Yeah. This is the game pin requesting all of you to please go to kahoo.it and enter the game pin. We'll start exactly in another 3 minutes. So, Justin, usually as part of our user group sessions, we do either a lucky draw or a quiz to engage the audience. Usually, it will be a quiz, and we distribute swag kits to the winners of the quiz. Yeah.
So you ready for this? I must have done another one of these ODC user groups about 3 years ago or 3.5 years ago. I just realized in the chat I've got a message from 3 years ago in here. So I must have done a user group. Must have done a user group January 19th, 2022.
That actually is a bug with Baby, though. Yeah, you will see the history of chats of our previous user group sessions all together in your DMs and chat.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
just
nice
saw that.
that you were, yeah, you got some idea of your previous user. Nice. So, Justin, so from which version of OutSystems did you start with OutSystems back in
Version
2009?
I used version 4 for a few months right before they upgraded to version 5.
Oh,
Version 5
okay.
was a huge, huge upgrade. That's when they added the community edition, which allowed basically it's like a personal environment today, but imagine personal environment meaning you had to install Windows Server, IIS
Hmm,
server, SQL Server. You had to do like half a day's worth of installations to get the community edition up and running, but it gave you a way to work without having to purchase it.
that's huge. Okay. Oh, I see, Justin. Have you also? Okay.
Yeah, I just
So is
joined.
that
Should
you,
I,
Justin? Okay.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Okay, we are almost time. Is anyone yet to join? Okay, I guess we can get started for time being as we are left with only 5 minutes. Oh, sorry about the spelling error. The right answer is true. Very well done, Jivita. Let me, guys, 1 minute. I would like to share my screen with the audio. 1 minute. Yep. So now it's better. Moving on. The right answer is false. Five of you have got it right. Well done, Mukesh. Moving on. Fetching the user data via the user's API is the best way. Very well done, Mukesh. This is 429. So good job, Mukesh, Satish, and MLC. Right answer is for authentication. Okay. Sorry, it is a workaround. What is the workaround? Right answer is option A. Maintain a replica. The last question of today's session. This will be an easier question. Right answer is true. With this, we have concluded this quiz. Let's see the winner. And see. Congratulations, Mr. Satish and NLC. But the person who has joined as MLC would have to provide his or her full name. Okay, and of course, a big shout out to the runners as well. So, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. And thank you once again, Kristen, for your time and for sharing very useful insights about use of management in such a short time. So, we also have Hati Mary here. Hati Mary, would you like to add anything? Yes, she's on mute. Yes, Kristen, would you like to share anything?
Are you able
Sorry, I
to
missed the question.
hear me?
I was responding.
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you. No, no, Justin, nothing specific. I was just concluding the session
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody
Thank
for coming by and showing up. This was a good time. And I hope everybody else has a great evening.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you so much for your time. Mary, were you saying anything? Sorry, I couldn't hear you properly. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.